Toastmasters since 2014. Tonight, she will be concluding her speaking requirement for her Advanced Communicator Silver Award by speaking to us about how to conclude a speech effectively. Please welcome Jennifer Su. Fortis Kosumari, Jennifer Su.
So this is my speech title. Can you guys pronounce it again?
Fortis Consumare.
Okay, don't shout out. Hands up if you speak Latin and you know what it means. I'll let you know later.
Fruit continuous.
What? Don't tell. Okay. Now I have a quote, and Ryan, would you mind reading it? And another mystery, I want everybody to guess what Shakespeare play this is. So if you don't mind, read it nice and loud. Yeah.
The king's a beggar, now the play is done. All is well ended if this suit be won. That you express content, which we will pay, with strife to please you, day exceeding day. Ours be your patience, then end, yours our hearts. Your gentle hand lend us, and take our hearts.
Thank you, Ryan. Give him a hand. So, any guesses what that play is? What that quote is, what Shakespeare play? That is from All Is Well That Ends Well. And maybe it's starting to become clear how this relates to conclusions. What does that phrase mean, all is well that ends well? You can have some problems along the way, but if you finish strong, which is what Fortis Consumare means, then all is well that ends well. I remember in college, a friend of mine who happened to be a philosophy major asked me this really deep question. He said, what if I have a beautiful life, and I have all these friends, and I have a great career, and I have love, but I come to the end of my life, and I'm sick, and all of my friends have passed away before me, and I'm alone. Will that negate everything that has gone before that was good? Well, not exactly. And you can't exactly have a speech where you make mistakes all the way through, but have a strong finish and have everything be okay with your speech. But just like if you have a difficult ending in your life, that's your last memory. And if you have a troubled conclusion to your speech, that's going to be the audience's last memory of your speech. So a strong speech conclusion really does matter. And what is the criteria for a strong speech conclusion? How do we end our speeches strong? So remember, even if you make a mistake through the body of your speech, you finish strong, and the audience will remember that 2 or 3 weeks later. The criteria, the first thing is to achieve a sense of closure. Now, with a sitcom or a TV series, a lot of those end with a cliffhanger. Why is that?
I think it's because they want you to tune in next week.
They want you to tune in next season, but your speech doesn't have a next season. So you don't want to end with a cliffhanger. You want to let everybody know that you're ending your speech. And there are some phrases that you can use that give your audience a clue and help them tune into, hey, the speech is ending, here we go. You can use a phrase like, in conclusion, I'll end by saying, and in summary. But if that's the only thing that you do to tie up your speech, that can be a little bit heavy-handed, and you can even end a little abruptly that way. You still want to end your speech by making an impact. You want to have a grand finale, so to speak. And I'll draw from the famous, impactful speech, I Have a Dream, by Martin Luther King. So how many times do you happen to know did he say, I have a dream, throughout that speech? He said that 8 times. And how many times did he say, let freedom ring? He said that 8 times also. So he kept repeating this refrain from introduction to body of his speech, so that the audience was kind of with him and anticipating that. So with a conclusion, you end impactful, but it doesn't stand alone. With Martin Luther King's famous speech, he set the stage all the way throughout the speech, and then he used the conclusion to take his final bow. And he said, these are the words, the very final words out of his speech, free at last, thank God Almighty, we're free at last. So he referred back very powerfully to everything he had spoken about, and it was much more impactful than if he had said, in conclusion, we won't be free until, or my dream won't be realized until everyone's free. And the third criteria for a successful speech is to take 5 to 10% of the entire speech time. So rule of thumb, leave about 80% of your time for your body and about 10% of the time for the intro, 10% of the time for the conclusion. You don't want to come to your conclusion and have it not be impactful because you have to rush through it in order to meet your time. So this is the basic criteria for a good speech conclusion, and Toastmasters gives us quite a few techniques to approach your conclusion. So let's look at some of those techniques. The first one is to use a quotation. And why use a quotation? Quotation can lend authority and add drama to your speech, but a couple caveats: you don't want a quotation that's too long, and you don't want a quotation that doesn't really fit your speech exactly. It needs to relate. So I committed a bit of a faux pas by using this quote from Shakespeare's play All Is Well That Ends Well. The title of that play has something to do with my speech conclusions, but the quote itself is too long and it's not really related to my speech message or topic. And I'm going to pass out 3 quotes. Could you take one, read it, and pass the other 2 down, and have you guys read them, and we'll have a little discussion. My speech topic is why are quotes important in speeches. So they're going to each read a quote, and let's decide which quote is most fitting based on short and sweet and based on related to that topic, which is why are quotations important in speeches. So Rita, do you want to read yours first?
Sure. When one begins to live by habit and quotation, one has begun to stop living. James Baldwin.
Donna, what's yours say?
A quotation in a speech, article, or book is like a rifle in the hands of an infantryman. It speaks with authority. Brendan Beer.
Okay. And Patty, how about yours?
I gave mine to Monica.
Oh, Monica, how about yours?
Life itself is a quotation.
So which one do you feel is most fitting in terms of being short and sweet, and most fitting in terms of relating to the speech topic, which is why are quotations important to speeches?
Monica?
Monica? Anybody have a differing opinion? I was thinking you guys would say Donna's because hers talks about quotations lending authority to your speeches. But as you research quotes for your conclusion or any part of your speech, good places to find quotations are goodreads.com, brainingquotes.com. That's where I got those. Keep them short and sweet and make sure that they're related to your topic, though. Okay, another closing technique is to tell a short story or an anecdote. And you can use an inspirational or funny story. It's great if you can pull a story from your own life, but you can also borrow an anecdote from the lives of well-known people. They just have to relate to your speech, relate to your message. So here's an example of an anecdote about the Russian writer Leo Tolstoy that might go well in a speech conclusion where you're talking about how to address questions from the audience during the question and answer period. So this is the anecdote. Tolstoy was a great pacifist, and he was lecturing on the need to be nonviolent towards all creatures. And someone from the audience raised their hand and asked what should he do if he was being attacked by a bear in the woods. And Tolstoy responded, "Do the best you can. It doesn't happen very often. And in conclusion, my friends, that is how you can respond to difficult audience questions. Take Tolstoy's advice and do the best you can." So that's an example of an anecdote that could relate to your speech topic. And develop it quickly, make it short, make sure it reinforces your message. And then another closing technique is a call to action. This technique is particularly suited to persuasive or inspirational speeches. Any famous speeches come to mind that have a call to action? Ask the audience to take some action based on their speech message. I always think of John F. Kennedy's inauguration address, where he said, "Don't ask what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." And this call to action inspired a whole generation of Americans to volunteer for the new and idealistic organization called the Peace Corps. So that's great if you are giving a persuasive speech and you can actually inspire somebody to do something, how powerful your words are. And the next technique is to use a rhetorical question or a series of questions. And this can get your audience thinking. And a real trick is asking a question in such a way that leads your audience to the answer that you're looking for. And as an example, I took a speech from Barack Obama that he made on immigration policy. And here's the rhetorical question he asked. Are we a nation that tolerates the hypocrisy of a system where workers who pick our fruit and make our beds never have a chance to get right with the law? So this not only gets you thinking, but if you answer yes, we're a hypocritical nation, it's sort of lays a trap for you, but it's a strong rhetorical device. If you answer the way that Obama wants you to answer, which is to change the immigration policy, then you're on the side of social justice. And then the next closing technique is a circular closure where you refer to the beginning of your speech. This is also known as bookends. And here are some approaches to using the circular ending. You can end by referencing your opening. So I started my speech by stating, all's well that ends well. And I could end it by going back to that refrain, saying all's well that ends well, and I hope that I prove this point. You could also ask a question at the beginning of the speech and not answer it till the end. So I could have asked you, what does this mean? And save the answer to the end. And yet another way to use a circular ending would maybe to use a prop at the beginning of your speech and bring it back at the end. And the final technique that Toastmasters gives us is to summarize your main points. Repetition enforces your message. So here's an example of that. To summarize, I've given you 6 techniques to close your speech. Use a quote, tell an anecdote or short story, use a call to action, employ a rhetorical question, use a circular ending, and summarize your points. So that's another way. Those are the 6 techniques that Toastmasters gives us. And now some tips for success. Try to memorize your conclusion so that it doesn't wander, it doesn't go over time, it's strong, it's succinct, and it's what you planned. And then be sure to end on time so you don't rush through it, so you can deliver that conclusion that you memorized. And then refrain from adding new points. Sometimes we forget to speak to something that we thought was very important in our body, so we try to use that conclusion time to pull those missed points in, but try not to do that. That will confuse people and it will detract from your conclusion. Okay. Man, the pressure is on. I've just given a speech about how to have an effective conclusion, but actually no pressure at all, because in doing this speech, I've picked up techniques myself for closing a speech and tips and tricks for having a strong conclusion. How about you? Do you feel better equipped to conclude your speeches? Good. Well, all's well that ends well, and thank you for being a great audience. What does it say?
Fortis consumare.
Fortis consumare, so end strong. And I want to test you. What techniques did I just use to conclude my speech?
Tie back to the beginning.
Can I use a circular ending? I tied back to the quotation and the prop. Anything else?
You reviewed.
And I used a rhetorical question.
Mhm.
So anyone have a new way they want to end a speech next time they give one?
Probably with a quotation.
With a quotation. Thank you for listening, everybody. I appreciate it.